but somebody makes me look half decent. So
filters you up. Yep.
We are recording. I've made Chris take the dog out, so hopefully.
Oh, good. We'll have no interruptions. I'm joking.
Blood jumps up in my face.
Cool. Ready to go?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is obviously our second talent podcast, and we have promised you a special guest today. On the last podcast, I'm sure you can all remember, but we did touch on rethink mindset and the 8 capabilities that Konica Minolta are focusing on to move forward. So today we are going to be looking at growth mindset, kind of thinking about what growth mindset means to us, kind of how we can help people develop that kind of growth mindset thinking as opposed to fix. And to help us with this, we've actually got a special guest today, which for those who don't know him, this is our CEO, Rob Ferris. So thanks for joining us. I mean, it's worth just noting that since starting, which is a year now, I think, Rob, isn't it, since you've been here? Over a year.
May the 1st last year. So yeah, just over a year.
So just over a year, which is crazy. I bet.
Completely in lockdown.
Yeah, which is so odd. Talk about having to have a growth mindset, actually. Starting as a CEO, well, starting in any role virtually, I think has been extremely challenging, hasn't it? But yeah, so I just we wanted to point out that obviously Rob's been here for a year now, and since he started, we've seen him advocate a lot for growth mindset. So Rob, do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, just in case people don't know who you are? I mean, it will be a little bit worrying if they don't, but...
Well, listen, no, everything is on the table in this situation. So, yeah, firstly, thank you for inviting me, and apologies if we break up through here. I'm currently having technical issues, so hopefully this next session will be fine. Yes, I joined Konica Minolta May last year, and yeah, so probably the starting point for that was I'd had 6 months gap between my previous roles. So I'd spent nearly 20 years prior to joining Konica Minolta in Canon. And I thought I'd probably be there about 20 months rather than 20 years, but had a great career there, but understand because of the contractual covenants I had to have a break between joining Konica Minolta. But I think that's probably one of the starting points, is that the start and the plans that I had to join Konica Minolta obviously had to be changed because it became very apparent in kind of February or March last year that probably the schedule that I was going to be working to and the way that I was going to need to work was going to be different. So yeah, and joined in May and have had fun ever since. It's been a unique situation, and I think that probably lends itself to the subject that we're going to talk about today, which is how do you get through some things that are unexpected or challenges, and what can you lean on to try and make that as supportive through that process as possible. But yes, I live in the countryside just outside Oxford. I've got a 10-year-old boy who's cricket mad. I've been with my wife for 27 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Time flies when you're having fun. That's what we say all the time. So,
very true.
Yeah, that's me.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Go on, Ames.
I was just going to say, in terms of a growth mindset, I guess actually trying to build those relationships when you first join somewhere, particularly in the sort of role that you're in at the moment, was that something that you found that you needed to pull that growth mindset forward in terms of understanding the business a bit more?
Yeah, I think I've said to a lot of people over the years, and I've committed pretty hard that to use the opportunity that was presented, which is I felt that being restricted to having video and not being able to go anywhere meant that I could meet more people every day than I ever would have done if I'd have been having to travel. So,
yeah.
And I've tried to share this with everybody that I've spoken to, that whilst I come from a competitor, a traditional competitor in terms of our print world. I'm also and was very mindful that Konica Minolta was a very different business, and everything I'd seen about it in the previous year of engaging with Konica Minolta was that it was a different business, and it had different values, it had different skills, it stood for different things. And I wanted to have as much of a blend of understanding the markets that we operate in, but also listening to everybody to understand what it is like to be at Konica Minolta. What are the specific challenges that we have with our skills, our talent, our experience, our history, and also the direction and the strategy we're going in. So I was very mindful of that, and therefore being open to understanding that maybe it might look very similar, it might feel very similar in places, but to be very open that it will be a slightly different shade in some places, and it could be completely different, even with what my preconceptions could have been. So I think having that kind of openness to not being quite fixed on things, even though I had 2 decades of indicators that might lend myself to understanding of how or what things might be, and understanding the industry that a big part of the business was still operating in, and also then just to rely on things that are at the core of having a growth mindset, which is thinking about the process, not the outcome. So making sure you kind of work through that every day, with every discussion, every meeting, every situation, just thinking about the process of it rather than trying to fast forward all the time to what the outcome either needs to be or you want it to be. And I think with the pandemic, more than anything, so much got taken out of everybody's control that they would normally either have control of or want control of. It became, understandably, a really worrying situation outside of the health and well-being challenges. Just about that whole, how do you operate in a world that all of a sudden the things that you have as pillars to hang to get removed, and making sure you kind of just take step by step. And there's lots of things you overlay with, that I've overlaid with kind of growth mindset thinking, which is just taking small steps and breaking things down into marginal cumulative gains and steps forward, rather than being on one level paralyzed by the overwhelming nature of some of the challenges or the things that are presented. So yeah, unquestionably something that I leaned on heavily over and still lean on, because things are moving every day with stuff changing that's out of our control.
Yeah, it's those kind of like manageable moments, isn't it, that you sort of need throughout? Because I mean, I joined in January of last year, so I wasn't here for that long before we went into a lockdown. So like some of these people I've met like a real handful of times, and you forget, because I think, well, one, I would probably make friends with a brick wall, but two, like we've had the opportunity. I do think a lot of opportunity has come out of, and don't get me wrong, like a very awful situation and something that I would quite like us not to go through again. But I think there has been a lot of opportunity, and I liked what you said about kind of taking each day or each process and kind of breaking it down into segments to kind of make it more manageable. I think that really works. I guess just also a note from me for anyone listening. Hopefully there's people listening. Do you imagine? No one listens, it's just us. I think that actually, I think growth mindset is a bit like resilience, whereby you can work on it to build it up, right? So you can't be expected to have a growth mindset all the time. There is definitely going to be days or moments where you don't want to, not necessarily give up, like, please, I don't want anyone to give up, but you have those moments where you go, I can't do this, I'm out, time out. And I think that's the reality, isn't it? Like it's a lot of energy to have a growth mindset all of the time.
Yeah, and I think the interesting bit for me is like I said, so my wife and I have been together for 27 years, but we've only got a 10-year-old boy. So we were together for a long time without children, and then going through the experience of parenting, and as they get older, there's lots that you can see. Obviously, so many parallels between what's needed to get through business life versus what you need to get through life full stop, whether you're a child or an adult. And I think that like you say, the fundamentals start from a different place. That most people, I think, maybe I'm giving away more than most people, I think, are naturally defensive about situations. You know, they're defensive of situations. So I don't think it kind of starts or finishes anywhere. I think there's a natural tendency to be defensive and make sure that your credibility is strong, and that's a limiting factor when, that's what drives fixed situations rather than kind of expansive or growth situations. So for me, I completely agree that I think most people start generally, and I think I've seen it a lot in my son's education, which is, without getting into too much of a deep one about school and education,
don't get me started.
but I think part of this is about failure. It's about having the confidence to fail, and unfortunately there seem to be too many situations in life, starting in school and through, where situations present too much of an opportunity for people to be scared of failing. They don't want to fail. They'd rather not do things than fail, and that comes from, whether that be education and a historical way of the education system, or businesses and the way that businesses have evolved over the last few decades, where people would just rather sit there and not make a mistake. It was safer to not make a mistake, and we all know, when we've been through and seen the success of taking a risk and taking a chance and being okay to fail, and knowing actually it's the fastest way we learn, and let's be honest, nothing original will ever happen in the world if we don't do something for the first time. True. So I think it's perfectly understandable how a majority of people will always start from a place of not necessarily wanting to take risk and be open and prepared to fail and take feedback when it all goes wrong, and you feel a little bit vulnerable.
It's that fear, isn't it? It's the fear, and I think that is instilled in you from a child, really. If I think about, not going into my childhood too much, but your parents like, oh, don't do that, you might hurt yourself, and that type of thing. We're constantly kind of being taught that, and actually we need to flip it and think the absolute opposite. So what you were saying then, Rob, about kind of progression, we can't progress without failure, can we? We've got to take risks, we've got to try different things, otherwise we're never going to move forward. And I think that's what we need to try and help people kind of recognize, that actually failure isn't a bad thing. It's actually probably the best thing that we've got, if we can actually take it and learn from those things. We see it a lot in leadership, actually, what you were saying, Rob, about being defensive, and Amy, you can expand on this because this is definitely your kind of specialism. But thinking about leaders, even like some of the initiatives we're doing at the moment with 360 feedback, for example, that's only as good as actually if we can take that feedback and learn from it and grow. Whereas a lot of people, you're faced with negative feedback, and actually you can go into that fixed space, can't you, where it's like, oh gosh, well, that's not my problem, blah, blah, blah. Whereas actually what we need to be doing is using that to grow. And they talk a lot about it when people start new roles. It's like making sure that you're putting yourself out there and asking for feedback all the time, and people are afraid to do that, and you can understand why. But I think it's, for me, when I think about growth mindset, it's about trying to kind of always be a bit of a work in progress. So, you're always kind of trying to kind of better yourself. And, it's the not thinking, oh, once I get to here, if we're thinking about the traditional kind of, way that we see not progression, success, it's always traditionally been kind of getting to the top, whereas actually now it's about not getting to kind of the top. It's like you can always kind of learn more. So it's all about kind of, I suppose, learning and kind of always trying to kind of find out more, isn't it?
100%. And
I think that's a good one, because sorry, Amy, go on.
No,
my delay.
No, it's just I talk too much. Go on.
So do I.
I know, I'm stuffed with you two. I'm joking.
Go on.
Oh no! What I was going to say. What I was going to say was, I think it's particularly relevant that with where we've been with the pandemic for the last year, rightly so, there's been a lot of focus and a lot of support focused around people's mental well-being. but also we know physical well-being is important too, i.e., you know, the importance of getting out, getting fresh air, getting exercise. And we kind of know, even if none of it, you know, even if we all put our hand up and say we could probably do more or should do more, we know there's a direct correlation with that. And I think the same applies kind of with training your brain, which is, it's the same thing. It's very easy to not do it, but if you, and I certainly think about when the growth mindset and everything associated with what you can do to help drive that forward, it is about that. It's about learning. It's about being comfortable not knowing stuff. It's about comfortable asking and putting yourself out there without feeling that it's being judged, you know, and that, like we said before about failure. And I think the more people can have that confidence of taking the first step, the bit that I found is, you know, that naturally was always an uncomfortable position, but like anything you do in life, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes, and the more natural it becomes. But you know, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, Sam. When you get that personal 360 feedback, you know, everybody's human. Everybody sits there saying,
everyone hones in on the one bad bit and goes, "Who said that about me? Why?"
Yeah, absolutely. And and that's just, it's a natural, isn't it? It's natural to do that. But I suppose it's kind of, and I think what's true there is, Robert, I think like anything, it's about having that awareness. I think, as you said earlier, we are not always in a growth mindset. You know, we flip between fixed and growth all the time. But I think once you've got that awareness, it's about actually being able to kind of take yourself out of that, think, oh, actually, I am being quite fixed with this. I mean, it happens to me all the time. I'm particularly fixed on quite a lot of subjects, which Amy knows about. But I am constantly trying to work at it. So I'm trying to kind of push the growth all the time. But and it's a really difficult thing to do. But I do think I think it's
awareness, though, is like part of the growth, right? So at least you're acknowledging it and trying to work on it. I think if you were truly fixed, you'd be like, no, this is just how I am, and I'm not changing for anyone. Never. And I think you are, you know, but there's all sorts of things that people are fixed on, and I think you're probably being a little bit hard on yourself, because I think you are, you know, you're saying that you're acknowledging it. So I think that's good for me. In terms of our kind of some of the things that we wanted to talk about today, I am going off script from what we had talked about, just because we were talking a lot about failure, and without it feeling too much like an interview, I was just wondering if anyone had any kind of, you know, scenarios where they've failed in the past and maybe used it for good, or maybe not, but anything.
I've failed so many times, it's unbelievable, Amy. So
the list goes on.
And there'll be plenty of people that have worked with me for a long period of time or previously will say that, saying, I could list a long list of things where he's failed. I think, interestingly, you know, if I think back on my career and you think about, okay, what are the things, what are the highlights or what are the lowlights of, I quickly realized in my career that I got more satisfaction and energy from getting results through others than necessarily getting results myself. You know, that was a very early self-reflection and understanding of kind of what motivated me, what gave me energy, what drove me. And therefore, when I think about lots of, you know, the successes in my career or failures in my career, more often than not, they're either when working with someone or through someone got success, or whether someone failed with something that hurt me probably more than it hurt themselves. So and because I've been fortunate to work with so many great people in big companies over a long time, the list is huge of kind of, you know, people that have had fantastic success that I've played just maybe a small part in, that gives me energy, and counter to that, the people that, you know, just didn't achieve or failed something that, you know, I feel a part of, because we're you know, as a team trying to work through stuff. So there's been plenty of those scenarios over the years. I can tell, you know, for sure.
That's good though, because we need to I think we need to normalize the conversation around things not always working out, because I think people are quite quick to talk about things that work really well and, oh, we pulled all of this together, and I think sometimes we forget to talk about the stuff that maybe was the trial and error to get to that point. You know, Sam, have you failed before?
God, so much. I failed a lot. Yeah, a lot. I was just thinking when Rob was talking then, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things that I could talk about. There's been a lot of failure in love. There's been lots of stuff that I bring up. But that might be a conversation for the pub another time rather than this. But oh my gosh, so much. And I think as I've got older, I've kind of started to be a little bit okay. Like I'm really into sports and stuff, and I joined I joined a tag rugby team in London. I joined it with my wife, and my wife's one of those really annoying people that's just really good at everything. You know, people that just you know the people I mean though, that are just really academic, really good at sport, you know, good public performer, whatever. So anyway, so we joined this team because we wanted to kind of get into a team sport together. And it was definitely a failure for me. I mean, I kept at it. I did keep at it every week, but I only really went for the pub afterwards because I was definitely the weakest link in that team. But I learnt to control my frustrations. I got very frustrated and very stroppy at times during my short stint at tag rugby, and it got my team into trouble a few times because I was had a few altercations with the referee. But I definitely took away some learning from that rugby is probably not the sport that I should play. I love watching it, but yeah, maybe steer away from that. But also just kind of about sticking with things and actually really trying to kind of learn the rules, and not kind of go off at people when things don't go my way. So again, it was a learning experience, but definitely failed. Definitely failed at tag rugby, but I have learned something from it. So I'll take that as a bit of a failure.
Yeah, and I think, Sam, just touching on that though, that I think it goes back to a lot of things. I'm certainly not one of these. Some people are just gifted, right? Some people are gifted, and that's great. But a majority of people have to work hard at stuff to be good at stuff. And go back to what you said about resilience or persistence. That mostly the people that get good at stuff are the people that keep exercising or keep training it and just keep trying and are, you know, are prepared to go to the training and be the worst, with a view and a positive step that maybe I'll be second worst next time, then third worst next time. And, you know, but that's the difference between doing that approach than just giving up because, look, do you know what, I'm rubbish. And I think that's always the easy option. And, you know I would be guilty of that in the past of you know, nothing worth having was ever easy. So, you know, perseverance and training and going and keeping at it. And that's what has really inspired me over the years of working and then playing whatever sport it would be with people that just demonstrate that commitment to train and try and fail. And when you see what they can achieve, you know, it's amazing. And that's the best visible example you can get of things. And you go, okay, well, that's the same for anybody, wherever you are, you know, whatever you're trying. One thing's for sure, if you don't try and if you don't try and be prepared to make, you know, a complete failure of it, you'll never get anywhere, never get any better. And if everybody can be more comfortable in that as a collective, that's when great things really happen. Because when you get the creative, collaborative approach and the cumulative nature of people trying and testing and being comfortable with ideas, you know, just ideas, that any idea is a good one. That's when you start getting real progress. And I think we've all been part of situations when you see it, the challenge is to try and keep doing it and make it happen as much as possible, because it's very easy to default back, as we've said, into well, it's a little bit scary and I don't really want to make a fool of myself.
Yeah, Rob, that's
the momentum gets going though, isn't it?
Yeah,
like when
it's
you
about
get
having that
people,
team.
the
collaboration. Like, I absolutely. I mean, I was, bless them. Some of the lads would teaching me at the weekends. We'd go to the park and have a little training sessions and stuff.
You didn't want to lose, that's why.
I know, it's true. I used to go in one ear and out the other, but I turned up and I kept doing it. And it's so true, actually, Rob, thinking about that and thinking about some of the projects that we've worked on as well, Ames, you know, often when you join an organization and you're quite new, and there has been people that have been here for a really long time, you'll be faced with kind of, you know, well, we've done that before and it hasn't worked, or we've tried that before and it hasn't worked. So quite a lot of blockers and stuff. And I think, you know, it's about having that collaborative approach and thinking outside the box and going around and all supporting each other. And I think that's such a key point that you made, because I absolutely wouldn't have done that if people would just turn their back on me and just been like, no.
I think what you said there is, and I've said this a lot over the last year, which is, and it's understandable why people could or would say it, which is, we've tried that before and it didn't work. And that's, you know, that is really valid. But with how fast the world is evolving and changing, just because it didn't work before is now never more a more relevant thing to have, which is, it could just be the difference between, you know, good and bad decision is sometimes just timing. And you know, and if we stop exploring options just because they were tried once, twice, 3 times before, we're going to limit the opportunities that could be there for us. And it's understandable people think like that, because sometimes the painful failures leave scars. They hurt, you know, both.
So true.
Both physically and emotionally, they can really hurt. So it's understandable. But I think, especially where we are with our business now and the world that we're operating in, when things are moving and changing so fast, to have that kind of open growth thinking on everything, which is, okay, you know, let's evaluate it. Let's just explore it. Let's just see, what did we learn last time? What was the reasons why we did it last time? Why did it fail? And it may be everybody comes to the same outcome again, but at least you've explored it. At least you've got the collective thinking in to explore. I think that's a great one, and I've heard that a lot here over the last year. You hear it everywhere. You hear it everywhere in life. Right?
We've tried
that. We've tried that. It doesn't work. And that's not me saying that they're not right. I'm just saying, okay, the more important part is for us to explore whether it's right now or could be right in the future.
And I think that's such a good point, because I always default then into annoying toddler phase where I'm like, why didn't it work? Why didn't it? And just trying to question that and understand it a bit more, because exactly what you said. So there's, fine, it didn't work before, but we're in a different period of time now, you know, and time is moving and disruption is just like on a scale like no other. But also we've got different people. So, you know, we can try again. And I think that's a really good one, especially like moving towards the future. I think growth mindset, you know, features in our rethink mindset capabilities, because we talk about the future, and the future is definitely now. It's not coming. We've been in it for a while, but I think it's just going to keep evolving. And as I said, you know, industry disruptors, kind of anything that happens in the world, like this is all without kind of our control. And I think that's where that kind of growth mindset really comes in to help us. Just in terms of, I guess we spoke a lot about growth mindset, what it means to us, why it's important to have it. I would be really keen to know from both of you, actually, just in terms of how you potentially like work on your growth mindset. So thinking about it as that skill that we can kind of develop and build it up in terms of resilience, a bit like a muscle, so that we can use it when we need it. What sort of things do you watch, read, listen to, do? What are your kind of go-to toolkit to develop that skill?
It's a good question, that is. I guess I could roll out the standard answer of everybody should, you know, listen to Carol Dweck and you know.
She's got this really good book.
She's got a really good book on mindset. I think it's you can pick up. So what's I'm kind of I'm a bit of a magpie of just reading all over the place. I skit all over the place with things that just interest me anywhere. And then when you're kind of aware of it, you pick and see and connect to it in places. I guess if there was some things, so outside of Carol Dweck, I mean, I always go back. If people sort of say over your career, are there books that you've read that you go, you know, which are the ones that kind of, for right, for wrong, for indifferent, sit in the front of your brain? Who Moved My Cheese was a great book that you know you can read in probably a couple of hours. But I just think it's so easy, and I think if there's anybody trying to kind of just get with a subject or starting out, I think Who Moved My Cheese is just a really simple story to kind of work through what people can just see and connect to about, you know, how different mindsets approach things and the limitations and opportunities that get presented. So Who Moved My Cheese has always been one which I just go back to enough. I don't think you can ever get bored of it as a principle of understanding stuff. Outside of that, I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni. So pretty much any Lencioni book I've probably read many times over. But the biggest part of that, and this kind of expands it beyond, I guess, mindset, which is about, Lencioni talks a lot about organizational health.
Okay.
And so therefore kind of how do you get outside of, you know, what is organizational health? And in simple terms, it's where you try and simplify things, remove bureaucracy, remove politics, so you have an environment where the strength of the business can start working, and that's where collaboration comes in, and that's where a growth mindset plays in, which is if you start creating an environment where everybody can contribute, everybody can connect to something, you start unlocking the opportunity to grow both individually, collectively, and as a business. So there's lots of different bits with Lencioni's work, but that always resonates with me because it's about the people being at the heart of it, and unlocking how you get people to be the best versions of themselves, through you know, showing vulnerability, putting themselves out there, you know, making mistakes, failing, working together on trying to solve problems rather than kind of pointing fingers about who's got the best or the right idea. So they're things that the other parallel to that is sport. So, you know, I'm a keen cyclist, and therefore kind of, I guess, over the last decade or so, seeing British cycling and then Team Sky come through with you know, their philosophy on high performance or peak or prime performance, which is, you know, just about marginal gains, which again I connect to, which is the breaking the bigger challenge down into small pieces, and you know, a 1%, a 1%, a 1%, a 1% gain starts making material differences. If you're trying to find the 20% and the 30% gains, you're probably going to keep looking for a very long time, and they're that much more difficult to realize. So, you know, they're the kind of parallels that you look, and there's lots of stuff I read from that. So sports, rowing's a good one. You know, I know there's lots said about making the boat goes faster, but any of the stuff you talk about, you know, Olympic rowing, about, you know, that is about synchronization. It's not necessarily about having the 4, 6, or 10 individually strongest rowers. It's who works in sync the best. And that for me is a great parallel to business. When if you can get the team all aligned, then the performance will go. You know, you will achieve great results. So they're the kind of parallels that I touch on. But I think the starting point is what I said. There isn't I kind of just dive around all over the place finding stuff that just grabs my attention.
That's a growth mindset, isn't it?
Well, it is.
For stuff to learn from anywhere. And I think
that's so true.
You know, I would say to anyone that hasn't read anything around Lencioni is a really good place, actually, because I really like his pyramid with that base of trust. And I think, you know, linking it back to rowing, to any form of team sports, to a team in an organization, like having that fundamental trust at the bottom of that pyramid before you kind of move up helps people to feel comfortable to fail and to talk about it and to have those conversations. So I think that's really good. What about you, Sam?
I liked Rob's way of saying that he just kind of like dives around everywhere, because I'm quite similar. For me, I think I've definitely been on quite a journey. I think a lot of it's to do with self-reflection. I like to kind of sit back at the end of the day, with or without a glass of wine, and think about how things have gone, maybe in my work day, in my personal life, things like that, and kind of think about maybe things that have gone well, but also things that maybe haven't gone so well, and then really kind of think about, well, why is that? Kind of what could I have done differently, or is there a different way that I could have approached that? I also think trusting in your peers, what you just said then, Amy, about kind of actually being able to really kind of open up and talk to people about things. That's really important. I often kind of try and talk to my peers. So I've been doing some work around boundaries since lockdown, which has been, because obviously lockdown has given us all a lot of time to kind of think about stuff. So I recognize things now in certain kind of peers and friends that I think that they do really well in terms of boundaries. So it's about actually approaching them and having those open and honest conversations and kind of getting ideas and feedback that way. And then also, as Rob said, anything to do with sports is a real good one for me. Also challenging myself as well. So whether it be, I don't know, you put yourself in a challenge for a particular hike that you want to do, and you think, oh gosh, I'm not sure I can do that, but it's about kind of the build up and training your brain to kind of think like that. And then just self-education. Like I've had to do a lot of self-education. I know, Amy, that's something you and I are both quite passionate about, thinking about some of the stuff around diversity and inclusion. There's so much that we need to kind of know more about. So it's about making sure that you're kind of putting yourself out there and reading things, listening to things. And one more thing I would absolutely recommend for the listeners, if you haven't listened to the podcast Elizabeth Day, How to Fail, that's a really fantastic place to start, thinking about kind of how you can turn failure into success. And there's definitely a guest on there that would interest everybody. There's so many different people that kind of feature on that. And then another thing would be Ant Middleton. I'm slightly obsessed with him and his books and his programs. So that would also be a good place to start from me. But
I love that. I think there's so much there, isn't there, that kind of covers it for everyone. And I think something for me that you sort of touched on as well, Sam, is definitely like I learn from others a lot. And I think that's something that I'm a bit of an oversharer, as probably anyone that has ever had a call with me will know. But that's how I like to learn, because I'm a very open book, and I will talk a lot about things that have worked or haven't worked, and therefore I think I go out for the kind of meaningful relationships where people do that back, because I kind of take that on to learn through others as well. So I think there's an option for everyone in ways to kind of develop and harness that growth mindset. Just to finish up, what is the best piece of career advice you've ever had?
Oh, she's putting us on the spot, isn't she, Rob?
Sorry, I don't know why I send out emails. Why don't you start,
Ames? Have you got yours? Could you give us yours?
My best piece of career advice. Oh God, I'm meant to be asking the question. No, the one, honestly, I think this always sticks with me, and I cannot remember who said it to me, and they definitely stole it from somewhere else. But if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I love that so much, especially for someone like me who learns from others. It's just constantly trying to strive to be better or learn more. And I think that thought process of going into every conversation to learn something rather than to shift it to talk about yourself, I think it's that piece of, just constantly kind of getting something from others.
I'm trying to think. I mean, one thing I would say is I was told, years and years and years, don't try and be someone else. Be the true and honest version of yourself. Be authentic, and because that's the only thing that will last through, and ultimately that's where connection and trust and everything comes from. And that, I think, in a career and maybe in life, but certainly in business, sometimes you can feel a pressure to act or behave in a certain way. And I think certainly, as careers move and you go into different opportunities, there can feel a pressure to adapt and to maybe move away to fit in, or what you perceive to fit in, or behave in a certain way based on a different role you might have. And I was always kind of taught years and years ago, which is, you know, try and if you can just be you. Don't pretend to be anybody else. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable, because if you go into a role and you take over someone that's a very different profile, as an example, that go back to what we were talking about. You can start self-analyzing and thinking, okay, everybody's expecting this and I'm that, or but that's one bit of advice I've kind of tried to live by, which is, whenever I meet anybody or see anybody, you're not going to get a different version of me. This is me. Whether 365 days of the year, you're going to get this. you're not going to go.
No 360 feedback's going to change that. What about you, Sam?
Oh, it's really difficult. Quite similar to both of you, I think. I think when it comes to imposter syndrome, I think sometimes I struggle from that. And quite recently, actually, somebody said to me, but because sometimes I kind of get hung up on the fact that somebody's really technical, and they know everything really technical about all the solutions, for example, that we've got at KM, and I absolutely definitely don't, as much as I try to kind of do as much Googling as I can. And I think sometimes that that can kind of throw you off a little bit, can't it? And it can make you feel a little bit less valuable. And someone just said to me, that actually we've got to remember that actually we value difference, and if everyone had the same skill set, then we wouldn't move anywhere. So you've got to kind of remember that what you bring to the table is absolutely something that what other people within the team don't. So, and I think it's about always thinking that, isn't it? And also trying to learn more about the solutions and having a growth mindset. It's like, I can't do that. No, I can't do that yet. That's what I have to keep saying to myself.
And what a quote to end it on. I like that. So I thought you'd rehearsed it. No, in all seriousness, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was really, really helpful. Sam, did you want to just talk about what's coming up next?
Yeah, next time on the Talent Podcast, which we need to think of a name for, we are going to be looking at the subject of adaptability, which will also kind of cover, probably quite extensively, resilience. And we're going to be joined by Mark Ash for that one. So yeah, please come along and join us next time. But Rob, thank you so much. I hope you've kind of enjoyed it. If you've got anything that you want to add, or if we kind of
thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
Always.
Thank you so much. Perfect.
I'm
all
so
right.
glad. Well, thank you everyone for
Have
listening.
a great week.
Bye.
See you.